Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Global Party Healing on All Levels, and you are in for a special treat. So I am here with Misgana Kindo, originally, well, she's from Ethiopia, but living in the UK right now.
Yes. Hello.
And this is going to be a great conversation because she's had a personal experience with what we both consider a divine healing with her daughter and eczema. And we're going to be talking about that. And as I've asked everybody to pick a song that brings them a sense of peace or inspiration, what did you pick?
When Peace Like a River.
When Peace Like a River. Could you imagine that in your life? If peace, you had that same peace as you watched a river and you just knew that was always in your life.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be great if the whole world felt like that?
Amazing.
Let's just there. So I'm going to play just a little piece of that, just so everybody gets an idea.
Yeah. When peace
Wow, that's so beautiful. And that in a sense of singing, right? Singing is one of those ways to just open yourself up to the divine, to God.
Yes. I'll say song is a weapon to overcome discouragement. Yes, it is.
I like that. That's a tweetable.
Yes.
Right? Song is like a weapon.
To overcome discouragement.
To overcome discouragement, right? And it's true because, like, I think back about songs that I used to listen to when I was growing up in the 80s, okay?
Yes.
And the songs that I was listening to, the pop songs were, oh, you're heartbroken, and you're heartbroken, and you're heartbroken. And literally, I became heartbroken.
Oh, no.
You know what I mean? Like it was the wrong songs to be singing instead of the songs about peace be like a river.
Yes.
So did you grow up singing and being connected? Tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up in Ethiopia.
As far as singing is concerned, it was a family tradition. We always sat together and we sang. My brothers played guitar and we sang. But we normally sang to praise God. So it was definitely a way of connecting with our Creator. Growing up in Ethiopia was a lot of fun because it was a very rich culture and a lot of community around. So it was beautiful. Yes. I grew up in a family where my father was a nurse and anesthetist, and my mother was a laboratory technician. Mm-hmm. So they were really medical. They ran their own clinic and they were helping patients. So it was more or less, I grew up in the medical system. Yes.
And in growing up in the medical system, you just naturally wanted to follow in their footsteps?
Yes, I did. And when I finished my studies, I went to the nursing school. I went to a nursing school in Kenya. Mm-hmm. And I finished studying and I became a nurse.
And so in all that experience, you were schooled mainly in traditional, like as we would say in the Western world, pharmaceutical, or were you also schooled in the fact that there was herbals and natural elements that helped keep you healthy?
I would say not so much of the herbals. I would have liked more of the herbal education because I went to, I'm sorry to say, because I went to a Seventh-day Adventist institution, and they should have, in a way, that was our foundation when the sanitariums were opened in the beginning. It was to practice natural medicine and to heal with the simple remedies of nature. But over time, people have moved a bit from that. And now we find what they teach is basically, traditional medicine for most of it. Of course, we have a little bit of water therapy and other practical lessons. But it has become mainly the traditional standard medical system. And so for me, growing up in that, I have never opened my mind in those days to think, okay, herbal remedies are alternatives or simple remedies, just missing a meal or two when you're not well is an alternative. I didn't think of that until my daughter became sick, and then she was really, really unwell as a result of the medications I was giving her. And then finally, after she recovered, again, I went back to the books that were written by Seventh-day Adventist pioneers like Ellen G. White. And I was reading those books, and it really dropped my mouth to read things like drugs are poison, and we should really go back. They shouldn't be used. They should have never even been used in our institution. It was like there was a lot of, almost like a regret kind of sounding, how it was written that we should really be using the real doctors of natures are nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, air, rest, trusting in God. And those are the real medicine and the true doctors. And after reading those things, I went back to study more and more and more about them. And now it's become part of me. And that's what I want to practice. And that's what I want to teach my children. And that's how I want to help people get better.
Oh, that's fabulous. Because I feel that we each have our story, right, of what our difficulty was, but that really is our gift.
It is.
That we're able to share. I grew up in, the standard medical stuff. So I actually had eczema as a young child. And I remember the doctor saying back then, I found stuff that said that I was allergic, like maybe to chocolate and to eggs or things like that. And I would get these patches that would come up, and sometimes I've had it in my head and different things, and it was always cortisone.
Yes.
Cortisone. And that stayed the same for, the 20 topical steroids for like the 20 years that I was on them, for sure. Maybe I still took them till about 25.
Until you were 25.
Yeah. So when did your daughter first, when did you first discover she had eczema? Like, was it right when, as an infant?
When she was born, she really had very dry skin from the time of birth. But what happened was when about she was 6 months old, that's when she was having patches around her mouth and just her cheek. And it was just only that. But I was really worried. If it was now, I would have done it differently. Maybe I would have just even waited. Maybe it would have gone on its own. But what I took her to the doctors, and I was given topical steroids. So I kept applying and the eczema kept on growing and becoming more angry. And initially it was just around her face, but then it went down to her neck, and it went down around her body, and eventually covered all over her body. And when she doesn't have topical steroids for a day or two, her body will just burn and really flare up.
Yeah.
And when she was 13 months, that's when I realized actually she's developed dependency to these drugs. I actually didn't realize. My husband was researching a lot, trying to find out what the problem was.
Right.
And then he was reading about people's blogs, how they're suffering when their body doesn't have the topical steroids.
Right.
Not everyone gets addicted, but my daughter happened to be the ones who get addicted. Topical steroid addiction is really a real problem. And so I didn't believe him to start with. I told him it's only on the skin and it won't, it wouldn't. But then the more I read about what these people are experiencing, it was exactly identical to what she was experiencing at the time. So yeah, that's what happened.
Well, and isn't it great that those people that had those experiences were sharing, right? And that is the awesome part of technology, that although we might go to an educational system, or that wants to basically say this is how it is. Nowadays with the internet, and this is one of the reasons I'm passionate about, connecting in the global party here, is because as we each share our story, someone else could be going like, oh, that's me. And I would love it. My vision, one of my visions is for when someone goes to a doctor, and the doctor, it's beyond their capability, right? That they don't know, that they say, Misgana, I don't know anything more than what I've told you. I can't do anything more than what I've told you. But what I do know is there's lots of people that have great experiences and healings of different ways, and I encourage you to go explore that.
That would be great. Yes, that would be great.
It would keep the door open, because I'm waiting for a lawyer. I'm waiting for one lawyer to say, oh my gosh, their Hippocratic oath is thou shalt do no harm. And when we realize that the word gives life, and the word also, when we're unconscious of what we're saying, the doctor basically saying you only have this much time to live, and people take that and that becomes their reality. So they're actually giving them a death sentence.
Yes. So because it's in the mind, and
So you had this, topical steroids. So if you didn't catch that, people in the story, there are addictions to topical steroids.
Exactly.
So that's another tweetable. Addictions to topical steroids. You think addictions to drinking, you think addictions to drugs. We're talking topical steroids.
Actually, Jackie, there's the International Topical Steroid Awareness Network. I'm not sure how many members they have right now, but I believe it's in thousands. And a lot of the people in that community have exactly the same symptoms what my daughter had. So yeah, it is really real. But the guidelines for the treatment, that topical steroid is the first line treatment for eczema, is not changed, even though there was a lot of request from the community. So I wouldn't really see that being changed from the medical system that soon. But us, as parents and as individuals, we can make a difference in our lives. Yes.
Yes, we can. So at 13 months, then you were realizing that her skin was flaring up even more if you didn't put on the topical steroids. And I can just say, like, for myself, I know there were times where I actually would put my hands under burning, like hot water to take away the skin. So in a sense, I was even causing them to burn in order to get the intensity of the pain away. So we're talking, for people that have never had this experience, it is awful. And so here you seeing this is your first child?
She's my first child, and when I realized this, she was 3 years and 2 months old. Yes. So at the time, with the information we had, we decided to stop topical steroids. I had to read a research article from Dr. Maravin Rappaport,
Okay.
and it really did make sense to me at the time. Then I will stop topical steroids. But actually, I have to be careful here and say, there could be different paths right now, and as patients, you should really do your research and know whether you should stop topical steroids or you should stop them cold turkey, or what I give to the people I help is an alternative to topical steroids. I'm not literally, even though I stop topical steroids, I realize there's a lot of pain in stopping topical steroids. It's not very easy to go through it and so on. But
Well, we'll just make a disclaimer here. Okay.
Yes.
We are sharing, and Misgana is sharing her personal story with what happened with her daughter.
Yes.
We are, in any of these broadcasts, we're not saying, oh, go do this. We're saying, this is our story. If there's something in it and you want to go to your doctor and say, hey, I'd like to look at options, or, you know, it opens the door to something else, that's why we're sharing.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Thank you for that, Jackie. And so what I actually offer my patients, or the people I help, is an alternative to topical steroids. Basically, after my daughter had all this problem, sorry to cut the story, but my son had eczema after some time, but it was not so much. It was only on his neck. And I didn't know what to do for him, because I would not go to topical steroids at the stage for him after what I experienced. But then he just, the skin on his neck kept on flaring up and flaring up. And so I had to go through, I had to find another alternative, and I was reading and studying and so on. And then I realized, you know, there are foods that make him flare, there are foods that don't make him flare. And so I had to see what food is intolerant, what food is allergic. And so how I help patients is literally by helping them eliminate preservatives, additives, and then helping them figure out what foods they're allergic to. That actually has to be worked with their physician as well, and what food they're intolerant to. And you know, through this, there is a process, and then once their eczema is well controlled, now again they can expand their diet. But all along, it's a way of trying to give them something nutritionally complete. So yes, but as far as stopping medication is concerned, they really need to speak to their doctor.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. Do you suggest, or have you had experience using essential fatty acids?
Yes, some people take it really well, and it doesn't make, for example, flaxseed oil. It's very good for most patients, but for some people, actually, they might even itch a little bit for having it. So it's a matter of working out what is good for who. Initially, maybe it's a good idea to go on an elimination diet and try one thing at a time and see. Initially, it's a good idea to do a bit of an elimination diet. And then once the skin is clear or the eczema is well controlled, it's a good idea to try and see which things can be added. So essential fatty acids are very good, but for some people, they can have it as small as a quarter teaspoon, and they're fine. But when it's increased from that amount, some people might just have a bit of reaction. So everybody is different. Everyone's skin and the way how everyone's liver or body deals with you know, this food substances. A lot of foods are very healthy, but even though they're really, really healthy food, they can cause irritation to some people. Something like tomato, it's very healthy, very good food, but then it can make someone itch. So maybe some people will do very well with peeled potato. If they eat a potato skin, they will itch. So it's a matter of working out, you know, initially having a kind of diet that has, you know, a low chemicals, and then increasing. That is just one alternative to topical steroids.
Right. I mean, I think, you know, it's a very good point that it's individual. So even when they talk about the 7 highly allergic foods, you know, and if you're, you know, the corn, the soy, the eggs, the citrus, nuts, you know, or it's one of the, and
the fish, I think.
Fish and dairy, and pork.
Dairy, the first one, actually, yes.
Right. So there's, I mean, we can talk about those things. I remember one time when my kids, we did an elimination diet, and just because I felt like, even though, see, my kids weren't vaccinated, and they were raised pretty much holistically extended breastfeeding and felt and all the alternatives, and they did the energy testing for allergies when they were very low. But I remember one time, they still remember, they were telling me the other day, what was it, that bread that you made us eat? It was like so thick, you know, it was like spelt wild rice bread or something when I was giving them a detox. I'm like, well, you couldn't have any gluten, you couldn't have any wheat, you couldn't have any soy.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I know. It's not easy. It's not easy. But actually, the elimination diet is different for different people. When I went to my doctor with my daughter, and they told me to do an elimination diet, but I actually didn't know what an elimination diet is. And actually, I don't even think the doctors really knew what an elimination diet is, how I should do it. They really teach it as a concept that, you know, a lot of this allergy type reaction that cause this allergy type reactions to be removed, and then wait. But the reality is, unless we have to ascertain cause and effect, once those foods are removed, the skin gets better. And then once those foods are added back, the skin reacts. Yes, that sort of ascertains cause and effect. So we can say definitely we can avoid this for a little while.
So now, was it all just about the foods, or did you experience some other things relating to how your daughter's eczema was healed?
Yes, so for my daughter's eczema was healed after she stopped the topical steroids. Her whole body flared. She became unwell for about 2 years. And then after that, she was fine. She only had like a patch on her neck. And then it was not just that. She also had tummy pains. Like, you know, she always, oh, my tummy is hurting all the time. But what I realized is, for her, there are some foods which are really high with a chemical, or I would say a compound that resembles aspirin in food, called salicylates.
Okay.
And if she has food which are really high in salicylates, she's having too much tummy pain. And until I changed her toothpaste in the end, which is like menthol flavored toothpaste, her patch on her back of her neck didn't go away. It's after the menthol flavored toothpaste was changed, then she became fine, completely fine.
So is it still like a traditional brand of toothpaste, or have you gone to more of a holistic toothpaste?
I went through different holistic toothpastes, but a lot of them have the mint flavor, and that's what was causing her the problem. So what I had to do is go for a brand called, I believe it's called Chloral. It's got no mint flavor. It's just soda, bicarbonate soda, and something like that. But that did really help, and I was really surprised. Just in a couple of days, her tummy pain sort of disappeared, and also the patch on her neck disappeared. but otherwise she was having quite normal life, you know. But for my son, it was a different thing that worked for him. He actually never had itchy skin until I was giving him now fermented food, fermented vegetables,
Right.
fermented foods are
Yeah.
healthy food for most people, and they, you know, they help with the gut bacteria and so on.
Mhm.
But was not for my son, and that's when he started to itch after he had that for like a week or two.
Mhm.
And I actually realized for him the problem is called foods that are high in histamine cause him problems. So I had to find out which foods are high in histamine and sort of avoid those ones. As long as I follow this guideline that I'm giving him foods that are not very high in histamine, he can. When his skin is bad, I have to make sure it goes really low. But once the skin is controlled and fine, he can again be free, as long as I'm not giving him foods that are very, very high in histamine, like cheese.
Okay.
And so when I do that, I can control his skin problem as well. So, so it's been a bit of a journey for me, but it's a way of knowing which kind of foods cause reaction to which people. So everyone is an individual. Even though my son, my daughter, born from the same father and mother, live in the same house, it's more or less the same. Their management is completely different. Yeah.
Exactly. And that is such an important distinction for every parent to realize, right? Is that each of your children really are different. Like for me, I have two daughters, and they're both shaped and look entirely differently. So I had to, for myself, look at that and say, okay, so if I want them to believe that they were created perfectly and are beautiful just the way they are, as a mom, am I going to be sitting there now and going back to the hair salon and getting my hair highlighted and putting my face all makeup, making me, because I was like, no, because I could justify it and say, oh, well, I feel better that way. But what I'm really saying is yes, because I'm not good enough the way I am.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I had to start to say, hey, you know what? I believe God made you just perfectly. So guess what? I guess God made me perfectly too.
Exactly.
That was the novel concept, because I was like the 12-year-old putting on makeup, So it's very important as a parent that we realize that our kids have different needs.
Exactly.
And to be aware in this world, because it's not just even about their foods, but who they're interacting with, and the media and the environment they're in. They're bringing back all these sensations, and those are harder to measure. But we can tell if we're paying attention and really connected with our kids that something is a little off.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Yeah.
So the skin being the biggest organ of elimination, once you were off the topical steroids, is that really where she just, she flared for a while for those 2 years, and like until it was like totally gone from her system? Is that how it occurred?
Yes. The first 28 days, now again, even in the community with the international topical steroid awareness community, everybody has more or less their own journey.
Right.
But there are some things which are very common to almost all of us. But for her, the first 28 days were very hard. She literally, her body burned nonstop, and she just itched day and night and nonstop. It was like that. But I would say literally the whole year or even a year and a half was so hard between me and my husband. We didn't sleep. We were taking turns to sleep. For her, she didn't know the difference between day and night. Actually, these things affect your hormones, and the adrenals are affected. The hypothalamus pituitary axis, it affects all that. They write that sometimes in a small label on a
yes. Good for eczema. Then read all the contraindications.
Yes.
Go this long, yes.
Yes, yeah. So the HPA axis, they call it, is also affected. But actually, patients are not really warned this is going to happen to them.
Oh, no.
And it would just be fair if patients were told, yeah, you know, this medication can cause dependence in some people or can cause addiction in some people, and if you stop it, this and this is going to happen to you. You know, that would be fair enough. But no, patients are not told. But what we found was that her skin really flared. She scratched really hard.
Yeah.
And at times, even her nails got sore from scratching.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, the itch was worse than the sore nails.
Yeah.
So she would just itch and itch and itch nonstop.
Yeah.
And so we just start to try and calm her skin as much as we can, tickle it, rub it, take turns, and at the same time function in a society. But literally, those 2 years, I can say we really didn't have life, because you know, there are things we like doing as a family. For example, go to church on a Saturday. We couldn't go to church for a long time because my daughter was like really not normal. She was vigorously scratching, and people will come and ask what's happening and so on. We couldn't go visit friends.
Yeah.
And there was so much of shading of the skin that I cannot describe. You know,
the skin shedding, right? That's what you're saying. The skin cells that are coming off. Yes.
Yes, there is so much shading of the skin, you can hoover it at the end of it. Or there are times, you know, you could just actually follow the
trail. Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I totally do. Because when I would have it in my scalp, that was when it first, I think when I first started working, that's when it moved to my head. And they tried to tell me to do tar shampoos and things like that. And I, you know, sometimes it'd be like, you're itching and you have like a crust. It's not the dandruff, right? It's just, and that sense of, you know, and then shaking it out. That's what I'd be like.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, get the vacuum, exactly just what you said. And it is, and people are like, can't you do something? It's like, no, when you have that itch, it's like,
yeah, don't scratch, or people keep on telling me.
Don't scratch, and you're like, it's you have this body, okay?
Yes.
Now, I have to say, fortunately for me, I did have a divine deliverance from that, and that was about in 2009. Finally, I'd been, you know, tapering away with foods and things like that, and then it finally just totally disappeared, and it's like, yeah, now that you're sharing this, I'm like remembering all these things. But it's like, oh, yeah, that was my life, wasn't it? Okay.
Yeah. So it was really hard, but we have overcome it, and we actually, I'm really grateful my daughter don't have so much of the memory of it, because she was also very young. By the time she was healed, she was about 5. Now she is 8. But she doesn't remember it much. This morning, she asked me, did you mean I had eczema before? It's like she can't even remember. Yes.
I the same thing. I remember a story of a little boy, and his parents shared very similar, that they'd wake up in the middle of the night because he was scratching, and it was just common. And what they did was they had no idea about cleaning products. And they changed the cleanings and got the chemicals out of their home and switched to environmentally friendly cleaning products.
Good. Yes.
And they found an oil, like in a sense, to, you know, to soothe, to bathe, like, you know, like almost like an oatmeal bath, but it was an essential oil. And life changed dramatically. And they would say the same thing. He does not remember that he had eczema, you know, but so that's great that your daughter has no
memory of it. No, not
well, that it just vanished.
Yes.
I did. And what about your son?
My son's was not a long-term problem. It was only on his head, which came, and I would say he only had it for a couple of months. But but in the end, as long as we take care of his diet, then he is fine. So his was not as traumatic. It didn't take a long time, and I didn't go to the topical steroids, and I didn't have all that long story with him. So so that was brief, I should say.
So if you were, the key is elimination diet, right?
Yes, and yes, actually, I have 7 steps which I'm gonna give as a PDF actually. So the first thing is
And that
nutrition.
link will be below when we're all done.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Yes. So the first one would be nutrition, very important. There's some nutrients that when we don't have them, our skin becomes dry, scaly, our liver don't detoxify as much as it should. So nutrition is really one key. And secondly is this, as you've said, Jackie, you've just mentioned the washing powder. There are many environmental chemicals and toxins. In our food, we have additives, preservatives, and flavors, and all this food colors.
Yep.
And all those are a burden to our system. And in many cases, the food colors and the flavors are actually causing something called urticaria, which is like hives, and angioedema, like a bit of a swelling. So eczema-like symptoms that come from them. So those need to be avoided as well. Before going to the elimination diet, it's a good way to eliminate this. And let's do that and wait. And if the skin doesn't improve, and then we can see what more we can eliminate. Yeah, so that could be, other things that are not nutritionally as important. Yeah, but so eventually, if the steps don't go through, then we can't do an elimination diet. It could be the last thing we should do if nothing else fails, if everything else fails. Yes.
Right. And how about when your daughter went outside and was out in nature? Did nature seem to aggravate it or help it? Was there?
That's a very good question. Even now, for some people, nature can actually aggravate if especially in case of allergies. And we having the pollen season. Yes, so it really does depend what time and what the individual is sensitized to. So there are times for my daughter, it's a good time to stay indoors when the pollen count is very high, and she knows that more than me. She will just say, I don't want to go, because on Saturday afternoons we have this habit of going out for a nature walk,
right?
And there are some Saturday afternoons she will be crying that she doesn't want to go for a nature walk, and I will understand. I'll stay with her indoors. But it's because her symptoms are actually not only on the skin, also she has tummy aches, but I know they're all related with allergy. But generally, nature is supposed to help us. When we breathe well, our circulation improves. And so outside doors, sunlight is very, very important for our skin. So nature is supposed to be very good, and it is calming in most of the times, but there are occasions where staying indoors could be useful as well. Yeah,
and again, that I guess attributes to the fact that each person is individual, right? And I think sometimes, it's been my experience, is when you're actually healing. So when you first stop the topical steroids, for instance, right, the body had to detox and in a sense was having like a healing crisis because it had to find that equilibrium. And sometimes it can happen quickly, or sometimes it's like 2 years. And I do feel that also happens when we go in nature, because nature can want to bring imbalance. So our eyes start to run, our nose starts to, sneeze because we're saying, oh, it's pollen, we got to get away from that. But technically, it's really healing something that we're unaware of. It's wanting to get this out of our system and be totally clear.
Yes, that's amazing. Actually, that's very, very a good way of looking at it. It is taking things out of our system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like, to me, when you're throwing up,
yeah,
right? Like I remember this time when Destiny she was like 3, and we went to this person's house and they were serving us a meal, and she didn't want to eat it. She was like, no. She's always had this acute sense of smell. And, I was like, well, of course I'm going to be polite and I'm going to eat it. Well, I was so sick for 3 days after. Like that was food poisoning. She never ate it.
Yes.
And there were a couple times that happened with different things that I noticed, that I would eat something and then feel my stomach would be sort of sick, like just even tight. And she would have refused to eat it. So I started to learn from her.
So go with her every time.
Well, it's like, being aware and respecting our children when they say no. Exactly. Like when your daughter says no, you're respecting that. So many other parents, I'm sure, are like, of course you have to come. This is our Saturday afternoon ritual. This is our family time. You'll get over it. Nature's good for you.
Yes. Actually, Jacqueline, what you said about children not wanting to eat, not to do with food poisoning, but actually, as a parent, I felt really, really bad that my children were fussy eaters. They will not eat this, and they will not eat. They won't eat everything I give them. They will only eat what they like to eat. But actually, as I looked into this, I have realized they don't want to eat the food that caused them aggravation in a way. Yes, and so it's really is a good idea to look into these things and see, why don't they want to eat an apple, for example? One apple is really good for, an apple a day. What is the saying? An apple a day takes
the doctor away, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, but actually, apple, for some eczema patients, can cause a flare or aggravation. Not for all, but for some. And so some people who have allergy and so on, they don't want to eat this, they don't want to eat, they will eat this. In a way, we need to listen to that and sort of make something that is nutritionally complete from what they can eat. And that sort of is the elimination diet to start with. And then keep expanding as things get better.
Yeah. So really what you're saying is that your children were saying, I don't want to eat this, because intuitively they already knew that it made them feel uncomfortable. And this is the respect of our children, when we recognize they actually maybe know some things that we don't know, right?
Maybe not all the time, but actually.
Because we think, they don't know their body. But I'll just share, last week I was with a grade 1 class, and the one little boy would have been labeled like ADHD. His mother wants to give him like Ritalin. And the teacher was saying, I don't think that's his issue, right? I took them outside, because I was saying that these, they really need to be outside. And there was this like a pile of dirt, almost more like the beach, in the area. And I said, so what's it feel like when you put your feet in here? Because I had them take their shoes off and everything. They're like, this is great, right? And some of them like, okay, so do you want to just stay here? And they're like, yeah, let's just stay here. And I'm like, all day long, right? You know, because I was wanting them to start to understand the difference between their choices, because so many of them are just already miserable in their life at 6, right? And it's, to me, just unfortunate. And this one boy that could never sit still, that's always after somebody, buried his feet in the sand. And he had them ground, and he was the only one that for 25 minutes, he just had his feet buried and he didn't go anywhere. And he just is, so I said, what do you want to do? He goes, I just want to stay grounded. And the teacher is kind of looking at this situation the same thing. And I'm like, so do you see, like, he can't express what he is feeling in the sense that I can tell my body, you know. He just feeling something completely different that feels good to him, and he is standing still, and you've never seen him stand still all year long. You know, and she's like, yeah, that's amazing, right? But that's an example where nature is helpful.
Yes, it is.
But we need to really understand our own children, and as mothers, that's really, really very important.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, that's right. In a way, you know, I was speaking with a mom. She was telling me, I think her son is making it up. He doesn't like, I spoke about apple, but she said, but he says to her, when he eats an apple, his throat is itchy and his ears are itchy, and, you know, these things are happening to him. And she actually, the mom thought he was making it up. But I said to her, probably it's really true that, you know, when he's eating an apple, his throats are itchy, and he probably is feeling that, and maybe that's why he wants to avoid an apple. Yeah, no,
my youngest, Faith, she's now 18, but yes, apples used to do that for her. She would get, and it didn't, even if it was an organic apple, there was only like one type, it was like an Ida apple or something, one type of organic apple that didn't do it. But she would get like tinglings around her mouth, and her throat would get itchy.
Yes, that's right.
And you know, no, eat the apple. I mean, let's, you know, this is about intuitive parenting, right? Is recognizing that you felt like there was something wrong, but all you knew because of your upbringing was to trust the medical community.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yes, and then do you remember what that moment was, though, that started you to think, or was it your husband that said, there must be something else?
Actually, my husband has a different upbringing from mine. He grew up in the village where, you know, he spent a lot of time with his grandmother, who was growing their own food, and he is really in love with nature, and he would rather not do anything that is not natural, like take medication or actually disturb the natural process. He had this trust for nature. So for him, but he is not in the health business, but he did understand these things more than me, who is supposed to be the nurse. Yes. So he said, actually, I think it's the same thing, Leon. I think this girl is very sick. And that's when I started looking into it. And eventually it did make sense to me. Yes, my husband is the one who pointed me to it.
Yay for husband, yay for men. Okay, they need some applause these days.
Exactly,
okay.
Yes, well done him.
Need that.
Yes, well done him.
Well, that was like when when Destiny, she just turned 23 yesterday. So, but 3 weeks before she was born, I came across a book called What Every Parent Should Know About Childhood Immunization. And so by the nature of the title, I thought, well, that's a good book.
Yeah.
Now, I had already decided I wasn't going to give her dairy, sugar, or meat for the first couple of years of her life. And then I opened up the book and I'm like, vaccines are made with like formaldehyde and, thimerosal and aluminum. And I just had to go, whoa, hold on, let's just take a step back here for a minute, because I think that's a little worse than sugar.
Exactly.
And I remember just going to the doctor on the fourth, the immediate visit, like the third or fourth day. And they're like, oh, well, you're going to bring her back in 2 months for her first immunization. And I'm like, I don't know yet. Right. And they're like, of course, otherwise she can't go to school. And I was like, now you're trying to scare me. Right.
Yeah.
And I did counseling with parents, and I just said, there's no right or wrong. And I think that's what you're wanting to say to people too. If you need to use topical steroids, to take away an itch, you can use them, right? Like, we're not saying that's wrong, but we're saying there's options, and you need to decide in your family what's best for your family.
Yeah.
Because it is, I would say, if you don't vaccinate and your child comes down with pertussis and dies, you can't feel guilty for the rest of your life. And that will destroy you. But if you vaccinate and your child comes down with autism and then you go, oh, I had no idea, you can't feel guilty for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
So it's like husband and wife, partners have to come together and decide what's best for your children,
right. Yeah.
and best for your family. So if topical steroids might, ease the situation while you start to look into this is the beginning of the story.
Yes. You can go into it knowing that, there is the risk of addiction, that you actually don't have the information from the medical system. So actually topical steroids can make an existing eczema worse, and a small application with a simple or let's say not a potent topical steroid will stop working, and the potency may need to be increased and increased and increased, and all of a sudden the creams are not working. Now it's time for tablets and it's time for injections. So there is that risk. Yeah, there is that risk.
Which is a huge risk. So one is for them to download your PDF, to look at the ways. 2 is to realize this, if this is the first time you've ever heard this conversation, this is a door opening for you.
Yeah.
Now, you can choose to say, I'm going to close the door. That's your choice. But you can also say, hey, you know what, maybe there's something in it for my child, or maybe it's you as an adult. Because one of the things is, if you actually either go online and read the whole description, or you ask for the pamphlet that goes along with the contraindications, just reading that alone might scare the bejeebas out of you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we really are living examples, or I will say proofs that we've lived this life and we've suffered it, and so you can learn a lot from our experience. Our mission is really to avoid so many people to not go through what we have gone through.
So if you would like some help, you want to reach out and just where is the best place to find you? Would you like them to contact you on Facebook or?
I will give my Facebook and also my scheduling page as well. Yeah.
Perfect. And just give yourself the gift of knowing health to me is natural, that we were created in this, intelligent, wonderful creation to be healthy. And you just need to discover for yourself what keeps you in attunement, because it's different for each of us.
Exactly. Yeah. I would say the same, Jackie. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. I believe we are the creations of the handmade creation of God, and He's made us really wonderfully create. And His work is marvelous, and that's what we are. And we're really equipped with this nature that is being prepared for us, that the grains, the nuts, the seeds, the legumes, everything that we've been given that can furnish our body and help us, nourish us, detoxify. It's all there. I think, I believe, and I will say I know. That is our medicine. Yes. Yeah.
And we have each convinced ourselves of what is true for us, right? And that's what we're bringing this information so you can have that opportunity to convince yourself of it's true, that there is a way to get off topical steroids. There is a way to heal eczema. You know, like I had it from the time I was 2 till, let's see, so 2009, October 31st is when I had my total, complete divine healing. I had a bloody eczema rash all over my chest, and I went to this spiritual experience and opened to God, and then the next day there was nothing. And I kept looking all day long, going, is it coming back? And it didn't. And I've never had eczema again. And so, you know, you can do all kinds of different things, but let's just start here. Get in touch with Misgana and get on the right track for your health, for your life, because things can be dealt with naturally.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us. I hope you come back. I think we could talk so much about, we could do a whole series regarding this for helping people.
Yeah, amazing. Yes, thank you very much, Jackie.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody.